Matrix, Willie Miranda.
And welcome to the Paradigm Matrix with my special guest, Mr. Robert Salas. Robert, how are you?
Hi, Willie. I'm great. I'm fine. Getting older, but aren't we all?
That's right. We all are, but listen, you're
Well,
doing
thanks for
something
saying
right.
that.
You're doing
Thanks for
something
saying
right. So, Robert, you have been busy on the interview circuit.
I have. I'm accepting more and more interview requests now. I'm scheduled to do a conference in Texas in November, and that's about the only thing I've got on going as far as the conference goes. But I've been on quite a few podcasts like this one, and I'm happy to share my story, and because of the, I think, significance of it, and especially with the way world events are happening right now, I think it has even more significance.
You're right about that. And before we went on and we started recording, I was telling you how I believe your 2010 talk, or when you participated in the National Press Club.
Yes.
I think that was the disclosure moment that I remember. I believe that was the original disclosure moment.
Well, it was the first time we had multiple witnesses to the connection between UFOs and nuclear weapons sites, I believe. I think that was the one that was introduced by Robert Hastings, that we both organized it and brought in some ex-military witnesses.
Yeah, to me that was amazing. At the time, I couldn't get enough of it because I had heard it over the back then social media was non-existent almost, and of course it was through shows like Coast to Coast and some other ones who played portions of it, and it was just amazing. To be honest, I was there with my mouth open and flies going in and out, because I could not believe what I was hearing. And then you went on in a couple of shows and talked about your experience in Malmstrom, which was unbelievable to me, and of course that I said, wow, somebody's actually talking about this, and something did happen in one of these, silos, and always when it concerns, those type of weapons and that type of security, it's and you start thinking that something like that could happen where, you could say what happened also there, you were there, and it was unbelievable, to me it still is. I think to me it's one of these stories that are just
Yeah,
it grabs you.
yeah, Willie. We were also talking about a mutual friend, Ray Fowler.
Yes, yes.
Well, let me start by saying he was vitally important in my coming forward. My incident happened in March of 1967 while I was a missile launch officer at Malmstrom Air Force Base. Ray Fowler, at that time, was working for Sylvania Corporation. He was a manager of electrical systems on the Minuteman I missile, which is the missile we were using there at the time. So when my incident and another incident I'll speak about, very similar to my own, which happened 8 days earlier, Ray Fowler had his people there at Malmstrom, his people that worked for him, that he managed, and they contacted Ray and told him all about it, including the fact that UFOs were seen during the missile shutdowns. And so it was Ray Fowler who, for reasons I'll get into later, in 1973, he gave an interview to the Christian Science Monitor newspaper, and told about the incidents that happened at Malmstrom involving UFOs. and the shutdown of missiles. And it was because of that interview that his story got into a book called Above Top Secret by Timothy Good. And I happened, let me back up a little bit. After my incident, I was ordered never to speak about it again, and actually had to sign a non-disclosure agreement to that effect. So in 1990, I followed that, of course, for about 27 years after the incident. And in 1994, I picked up this book called Above Top Secret by Timothy Good and saw a paragraph in that book that stated UFOs had shut down missiles at Malmstrom Air Force Base in 1966 and 67. And it was because of that I was able to file a Freedom of Information request to the Air Force with the help of an investigator from MUFON, and got some documentation and actually got the Air Force excuse me, to declassify the incident. And it was because the incident was declassified, I felt I was able to speak publicly about it. So Ray Fowler played a key role in my being able to talk about this today.
You know, I didn't know that, and I'm pretty sure maybe a lot of people out there didn't know about it either. And
Yeah,
just
I've
by
written about.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, I've written about this and spoken about it for many years now.
Yeah, and of course, you know, just by chance, I mentioned Ray, you know, and you said, "Oh, wait a minute, I know Ray."
Yes, great guy.
Yeah, without a doubt, without a doubt. As a matter of fact, here in Leominster, I believe Betty Andreasen was born here. She lived out in Ashburnham, where she started having her experiences, and
Yes,
Ray
Betty
investigated.
Andreas.
Yes.
Yes. Have you
Yeah.
met her?
No, I didn't get a chance to meet her. Spoke to her, you know, over the phone, but never got a chance to meet her. But it's funny how, you know, synchronicities are. You know, it's a small world. I happened to visit a diner here, and for many years, as the person that was cooking my food happened to be Betty's niece. Okay,
Very
and
good.
by chance, I got a conversation about her and talking about the subject of UFOs. And then we started talking, and, you know, she says, I don't know how the conversation got into, you know, Betty Andreasen, but she goes, "That's my aunt," you know? So it was like, oh, wow, you know, small world.
Yes, small world.
Yes, it is. It is. Now, back in, you know, going back to the National Press Club, you know, I believe two of those conversations events happened, you know, 2010, and was the other one in 2021 or?
Robert Hastings and I organized the 2010 conference at the National Press Club. And then in 2021, I organized another one, again at the National Press Club. In fact, if anybody wants to see that testimony, which involved witnesses going back to 1945, they can go to my YouTube channel, Bob Salas at YouTube. It's really Bob Salas at Giant Head 3 YouTube. But you can see all the testimonies there from many witnesses.
Yes. As a matter of fact, I believe I told you that I shared one of the interviews, you know, when you were speaking, I shared that, and they, you know, because believe it or not, a lot of people don't even think that those occurred. You know, it's you know, there's still people there still finding out. You know.
Yep. Well, like I said, I've been speaking about this for over 30 years. I've written 3 books about it. I've spoken in 16 countries around the world, including 2 legislatures, one in Mexico and the Senate in Brazil. So I think I've spread the word pretty well.
Now, Robert, as far as Mexico and Brazil, how How receptive were they?
Very receptive, especially in Brazil. Brazil has had a long history of UFO sightings and encounters. Um, I don't know if you know or remembered the main man in Brazil was A.J. Javard.
Yes.
Javard. Um, and I think he's the first to release information on the Varginha incident, which, of course, James Fox has done multiple documentaries about,
And a
and
good job he's done.
he's done a great job. And that is a very telling incident because, of course, many of the townspeople of Varginha actually saw the creatures. Two of the creatures escaped the crash alive, but they later died. Of course, they were probably not used to living in our environment, and they were captured and died in custody. There was an autopsy on one of the creatures, and after the autopsy was performed, the body was given to the U.S. government, and I believe even the craft was recovered by the U.S. government. So there's a lot of information there, but it is definitely has been shown to be an actual event, supported by multiple witnesses, and it's been well investigated.
Now, Robert, since you've been, to both of these countries, do you feel, I mean, there's a lot of people that feel that this country almost bullied its way to tell these other countries not to talk about these incidents, okay? And when I say bully, I'm talking about the prospective governments, okay? And do you happen to see that goes on?
Okay, one of the things I write about in my books is the existence of an international organization, which I call the secrecy cabal. And I think it was probably originated here in the United States under MJ-12 initially, and but its members include people probably in intelligence agencies all over the world, and they cooperate with each other, share information about the studies being done in their respective governments, but it's all kept very, very secret. And I think they will go to extreme lengths to maintain this secrecy. So, in that sense, it's hard to say who controls this cabal, but I'm sure the U.S. has a great influence in the control of it, and in that way, I think they're under. They control the participants in this secret organization in other countries. Like I mentioned about the Varginha case, our government was able to access the dead beings, or yes, that were captured, and also the craft. And they wouldn't have been able to do that without a lot of influence and control over the agents in Brazil, or the in government agencies in Brazil.
Great.
So yes, I think they do have a lot of influence.
Now, as far as these prospective governments, I see that Mexico, France, Brazil is a little bit more open to the subject
Yeah,
also.
that's one of the reasons they invited me and others to speak, is because they wanted to become more knowledgeable about the subject and open up investigations, which they have done now. And I think that's how James Fox, for example, was able to get more information, because he got some cooperation from the government of Brazil, and of course, there have been various conferences in Mexico and in other countries, such as France. Now even the UK, I think, is starting to open up. And it's all because of the disclosure movement has become much more active since 2017, the release of those of the Navy videos.
Yes.
And of course, President Trump has agreed to start releasing information on UAP, even though it's not doesn't have the substance that we'd all like to see. It's a start, and it shows the intent. I think that eventually we will get more and more disclosure, official disclosure from our government, and others.
Right. Yes, agreed. As a matter of fact, how do you feel about this current disclosure movement now? I know that you were, it started a while back, but it's good to see that this has gained now in this day and age, has gained some traction.
Right, and there's something called the UAP Disclosure Act, which is an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act, which is appropriations for the Department of Defense. But in that UAP Disclosure Act, which is a part of this NDAA, that should be signed soon for 2027 appropriations, it calls for better relief to whistleblowers, protections, and also for the establishment of let's say, a civilian group that is appointed by the president that will look into the release of more information. So there is definite movement in this front, and everybody's hopeful that we'll eventually get there. And I think, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think these kinds of things will just add to the interest by the public, and more questions will be asked, and eventually we'll start to get better answers.
How do you feel about over the decades, let's say over the years, and I know you have some experience, you did some work in the FAA, and of course I know that over the decades air traffic has increased. Okay, there's been a phenomenal increase in air travel. And have you been surprised that there haven't been more encounters? Okay, I know there's been pilots have had reports. Okay, but I'm talking about maybe some close calls with some of these crafts. Okay, which have been caused some concern. I remember many years ago there was an incident in O'Hare Airport where for some time I believe they almost shut down part of it.
Right. Yeah, and other parts of the world too, in China. Well, I don't think, and just my opinion, I don't think the occupants of these craft want to have close encounters with civilian aircraft. I don't think that's any part of their objective. But sometimes these things do happen when they get too close to major airports. But I think the incidents have not stopped. It's just that a lot of times people are a little nervous about reporting them, such as civilian airline pilots. I'm sure have seen a lot that they have not reported.
And I believe these are some different times. We live in a day and age where there's so much information, and we live in the information age,
Right.
So there's been, I think, along with that, there's been a little bit more openness also. The people are willing to accept more things than they
Yeah,
did, back, you know,
exactly.
back in the late 20th century, So it
Right,
is, in that respect, it's a different world, and people are, a little bit more open-minded and not afraid to talk about things,
right.
you know. Back in the when I was growing up, there was only a handful of shows that would discuss any subjects like this, and
Yes.
also that amount of that amount of books also, in this day and age. I mean, you wanna read up on this subject. There's plenty of information out there.
There's a lot of information out there, and I recommend your audience look into it.
Yes, a lot of them do. I mean, I've done my fair share,
Uh,
and let me tell you, but one thing that comes with that is more questions.
sure,
There's
of
there's
course,
there's ne- there's never an end to that. You know.
and that's good. Uh, that we need to hold our government accountable to try and answer these questions. We know this is a real phenomenon that's been established now. There have been many uh, officials, government officials, and witnesses that have attested to the fact that this is real. In fact, many of the conclusions are that they are not from this planet. They are extraterrestrial in nature, and we should be doing more preparation for managing the issue, including how best to meet these extraterrestrials.
True.
And I don't
Robert.
think it's by finding weapons to shoot them down.
No, I agree. I mean, I think they do a pretty good job of doing that. But what I do want to ask you, going back to Brazil and particularly Mexico, I don't know if you remember, but back in the 90s, there was such uh, almost like a flap of so many things in Mexico, especially in Mexico City. Do you remember?
Well, I know that there's been flyovers over Mexico City and in particular over the volcano
Yes.
because the government had video cameras on the peak of the volcano. They were able to capture some video of objects flying near and even into the volcano.
And
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 that has
even though some of those, I mean, they were trying to debunk, like saying those were airplanes that were coming in from approach to the airport, and things like that. But not all of them were like that.
no, not all. No.
No, nope. It's the same thing with the UFO, that was filmed by one of I believe it was a Homeland Security, one of the helicopters. It was Coast Guard. They filmed with FLIR this object in Puerto Rico, in Aguadilla, which is in the western part of the island. And this object was just traveling over land, and then it just went and traveled over water, and it went right in the water, and then came out again. I've heard so many people try to debunk that, telling me it was a garbage bag or a burlap bag. And I'm saying burlap bags or garbage bags don't do that.
Well, now you've got a Navy pilot in 2017 talk about these objects going into the water and moving through the water, underwater, and then coming back out again, which indicates they may have bases underwater. And there's a lot of supporting evidence that has happened, that can happen. Of course, we don't have aircraft to do that. Otherwise, we'd all know about it. So you can draw the obvious conclusion. They're not from us. They're not ours.
No, that's what a lot of pilots in that community say. It's not the Aurora, that's for sure. It's not that plane. But there's been some discussions about some of the researchers that I've spoken to about bases in Puerto Rico, and of course in the Catalina Islands out in your part of the country.
Right.
You know, I believe he's a Preston Dennett that talks about that, has written many books about that.
Yes. Yes, he
You know,
does.
which yes, and there's been a lot of reports, you know, with of course objects being seen. You know, as a matter of fact, um, Christopher Columbus on his logs wrote about seeing lights on the water on his voyages in the Caribbean. You know,
That's
so
going way back.
that's right, that's right. And for us, you know, going back to some of your books, okay, you know, you have written that I know of is two books or more,
I've actually written three.
three.
My last book is really an update of the second book I wrote. So we'll call it two and a half.
So, Robert, how do you feel about, as a matter of fact, the I know you've seen so many administrations over the years, and which one do you think have been a little bit more receptive to this subject? You know, excluding this one, okay? You know, because there's some administrations out there that happen to ignore the subject completely.
Well, I know under Clinton, the Clinton administration, there was a good deal of support to get to the bottom of this. I know Clinton himself has said he wanted to get the answers about Roswell. I think it was Danny Sheehan. I don't know if you know that name. Danny Sheehan.
Yes, I do.
Uh, I think it was under the Clinton administration. It might have been under the Carter administration, but he was asked to look into seeing if he could get some information that was classified about Roswell. And he actually was able to meet with some agency, I think associated with the Air Force, and look at some documentation and photographs. So there was some progress there. But let me just say, I think this cabal that I talked about has not wanted to cooperate with administrations, especially presidents, who are not there for a long time, let's say. And they don't know if they inform those presidents what they would do with the information. So I think they deliberately withhold information from all administrations, including the current one.
Yeah, correct, since they're unelected. So these people are just entrenched in there.
That's right. They're unelected, they're entrenched, but they have control. They have control. I'll tell you what I would recommend to anyone in government, especially Congress or Senate. They should go to get a briefing by what's called the Information Secrecy Surveillance Organization, or ISSO. They are the ones that monitor and oversee the classification system, our secrecy classification system, which includes these programs called SAPs, Special Access Programs, Unidentified SAPs, USAP, and they can give you a complete briefing about how these groups, these programs, which are funded by the government, most of it's secret funding, but it's funded, and there should be oversight of their programs. And these are the ones, these highly secretive ones, that are working on the UFO technology. And they are the ones that have access to any recovered craft or beings, objects, and that system is broken. The ISOO issues a report through the executive branch, I think annually. And the last report I read, showed how broken this system is. So Congress has a responsibility really to oversee this system of classification, revise it if need be, and these programs do need to be revised. But that is how we will finally get some access to the information we all want. Does the government have access to these recovered objects? What kind of studies have they done? What have they learned from these studies? And what conclusions have been made? This is the kind of information the public deserves.
Yeah, it's been
But it
a
can be
slow and
done.
tough fight. It can be done, of course. Of course. I mean, I guess they say you eat an elephant a bite at a time, right?
Yeah,
You know, and this cabal, Robert, and I believe it's probably been, like you said, from extends all the way out, and it has roots out to MJ12.
right.
You know, which in the beginning when that came out, and I believe Stanton Friedman was involved in some of the trying to prove his existence. You know, I believe he had his own opinions on that, and of course, you know, concerning the papers, you know, and all that, you know, and people trying to debunk them and everything else. But there had to be a system like that. You know, there had to be a compartmentalized system. You know,
Well,
in order to keep this secret. You know, under
yeah,
wraps.
absolutely.
You know, and it was, you know, I've told many people, let me tell you, the government can keep secrets, one way or another. They will keep secrets.
Yes, especially if they can get away with it. And I think
Yes,
they have been since at least the Roswell crash, probably before that. Uh, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Magenta crash in Italy in 1930.
yes, yes.
The information now being released shows that we got access to that craft at the end of World War II. Now, one of the things we did after World War II is we were able to get a hold of some ex-Nazi scientists, German scientists,
Mm-hmm.
including Werner von Braun, and brought them to the United States. Well, Werner von Braun eventually became a major player, project manager for the Apollo program. And before that, it was the Mercury program. There was an astronaut by the name of Gordon Cooper, who was part of both programs, actually, but started at the Mercury program and worked closely with Werner von Braun. And in Gordon Cooper's book, I forget the title of it now, but he wrote a book about his experiences. And in his book, he talks about von Braun meeting with astronauts on a casual basis on weekends. He'd have barbecues over at his home and talk about the programs he worked on, von Braun, in Nazi Germany. And one of these was working to discover secrets of UFOs. And it makes sense to me that the Nazis got a hold of the crashed vehicle that was retrieved from the the Magenta crash. That was the one in 1933, because that happened during Mussolini's time, and of course, Mussolini was a cohort of Adolf Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure when von Braun came to the United States, he was debriefed and told our intelligence people about this craft and maybe even its location. But they were apparently the U.S. was able to retrieve it and has been studying it. And so, in high secrecy, of course. And so, you're right, some sort of organization must have existed even at the end of World War II that's been studying this subject since then.
Yes, yes. And all under the auspice of national security.
Yes.
All under the auspice of national security. And as a matter of fact, Project Paperclip, and with all its known, they were, even though von Braun says, he wasn't, an actual member of the Nazi Party, and there were other members of Project Paperclip who were truly some hardcore Nazis, and eventually that was brought out to light. But during Project Paperclip, all this was completely buried,
Yes.
and who would ever think that it'd be ex-Nazis who had such an involvement in not only the Mercury project, the Apollo program, where they put a man in the moon. Oh, Robert, going back to the incident and your experience in the incident that you had or was involved in, can you tell us a little about that?
Of course. Uh, I I was part of a two-man crew. We were a launch team, basically. Again, the Minuteman I was the weapon that we had control over, and it had a very significant warhead. Just referring to existing documentation that's out there publicly, I'm not giving out any classified information here. It had about an 800 kiloton warhead. That's getting close to a megaton, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at any rate, we would go out about every 3 days. And on March 24th, 1967, my commander and I were on alert status at what we called a launch control facility, where we had to monitor and be able to launch 10 Minuteman I missiles. Sometime that evening, my commander was taking a rest on a little cot we had down there because one of us had to be wide awake for the 24-hour period we were there until relieved by another crew the next day. So I was in control of the facility. We were underground, about 60 feet underground. And we had 6 guards upstairs that were monitoring security, not just of our facility, but where the missiles were located about a mile or two away in a kind of a ring around where we were. So I get a call sometime in the evening by the security guard, main guard upstairs, and he said, "Sir, we've been seeing some strange lights in the sky, flying overhead, making very strange maneuvers, such as flying at very high speeds, stopping in midair, reversing course, making 90-degree turns. There was no engine sound." And he said, "Sir, these are not aircraft as I know them." And so it was a kind of a strange call, but he wanted to report it. I kind of I wasn't quite sure whether to believe him or not, but usually any communication we had with our security guards was very serious. We didn't joke around because of our job, right? It was so I kind of dismissed it a little bit. I hung up, told him to call me back if anything more interesting happened. It was a serious call, though. And by the way, they have no way upstairs to control anything to do with our missiles. We had all the controls and commands downstairs. About 5 minutes later, he calls back. This time he's screaming into the phone. He's frightened. I can tell by his voice. He's babbling, not making any sense, yelling. I calm him down. Finally, he says, I've got all the men out here with their weapons pointed at this glowing red-orange light that's hovering just above the front gate. And I don't know what it is. What should I do, sir? And of course, I didn't. This caught me by surprise. But by the tone of his voice and his manner, it felt like we were under some sort of attack. I didn't know quite what to think of it. No one had been injured. And he wanted to know what he should do. And I said, well, look, your main job is to secure the facility. And so you cannot let anyone or anything inside the fenced area. And so just do your job. And and that's how we left it. So I went over after the phone call, went over and woke up my commander. And I was about to tell him about the phone calls, but then a big horn goes off in the capsule downstairs. And we both knew what that meant. There was a problem with one of the missiles. So we look over at our status board, and sure enough, we had indicators there that showed the status. And usually they were green, all ready to go. But we looked up and we saw one was red, or no-go. Both jumped up, went through our checklist to see what the problem was. We had a way of querying the system. It would give us a voice reporting of what the problem or issue was with the missile. And it was guidance and control system failure. But very shortly, all 10 of the missiles shut down. Not just the one, but all 10. And they all read out the same guidance and control system failure. We also had a couple of what we called incursion lights, or lights that showed the possible entry into where the missiles were actually located, the physical location. So I called up upstairs because I had to send guards out there to take a look at those facilities, which were about a mile away. Of course, I asked about the red light, and he said it just flew off just as you called, sir. And so that object was there when the missiles went down, all 10 of them. We sent guards out to those two sites that had these incursion lights, and they got within half a mile, and they could see lights, these objects hovering just above those two launch sites where the missiles were. And they begged us, they said they didn't want to go any further. Normally what they would have done was go to the facility, unlock it, and look around. But in this case, they were still very frightened.
Yep.
We brought them back. And then my commander had to call the command post back at Malmstrom's. We were about 100 miles away to the east of Great Falls, Montana, where our base was, at Malmstrom Air Force Base. And we reported it. And when he hung up the phone, he turned to me and he said, the same thing happened at another flight.
Oh, wow.
I thought he meant the same thing happened that evening. But years later, after I started researching this, it turns out that there was a second incident that happened 8 days earlier. Now, we were ordered back to the squadron commander's office that next day after we were relieved by another crew. And in his office was a man from AFOSI. I walk in and I look at my squadron commander, who was an old World War II B-17 pilot, been through a lot of difficult times in the war. And when I looked at him, his face was ashen white. I said, "What the hell happened out there? Was it some kind of an Air Force exercise?" He said he had no idea. It was not an Air Force exercise. It wasn't any kind of a
Drill.
drill.
Type of drill. Yeah.
And then this guy from AFOSI pushed these papers on us, said, "Sign here. This is a non-disclosure statement that you must sign," and agreed never to talk about this ever to anyone, including anyone in the Air Force. So even though I tried to complain about this because we already had above top secret clearance, he said, "You must sign these." And so we did. And I was not able to talk about this. And I didn't for about 27 years.
Long time.
Yeah.
It's a long time.
So about 1994, I was at a bookstore in Seattle, Washington. Happened to see a title of a book called Above Top Secret by Timothy Good. I opened up the book to one page just to check it out, see what it was about. And I happened to turn to the only page in that 500-page book that talked about UFOs going over a missile site and shutting down the missiles in 1966 and 67. I was astounded by this, flabbergasted, because I had spent the last 27 years keeping my mouth shut about it. And here it was in this book. So I went home, and the first thing I did was show the book to my wife and say this was my incident, because it sounded exactly like what I had remembered at that point. Now, some of the details I had forgotten over 27 years because I intentionally didn't want to remember details in case for some reason I slipped up and started talking about it. But at any rate, I thought this was my incident, and I decided to go ahead and contact the Mutual UFO Network and get an investigator, which I did, and asked him to help me write a Freedom of Information Act request, FOIA request to the Air Force to see if we can get any information on what was written in that book. We didn't say anything about UFOs in our request. We simply wanted information. We quoted the book. We got a letter back from the Air Force saying this incident was classified. However, since it's been so long, they were going to declassify it and send us some documents, which they did. And as soon as I got that stamp that said declassified or unclassified, I started going public and giving interviews. I gave an interview to the Great Falls Tribune, got a front page write up on that. Anyway, I went public.
Mm-hmm.
But I included the fact that these incidents involved UFOs, a UFO encounter.
Well, Robert, were you ever able to speak with your ex-commander at all? After you guys left the military?
Again, I didn't even remember his name at the time I started speaking about it. And it took me a while. And yes, I finally located him in 1996. His name was Colonel Frederick Mywald, and got his phone number, gave him a call, and I've actually got recorded that call and have played it every time I speak about this in a conference or public, I play this recording where he confirms what I just told you.
Interesting enough, have you been able to anybody else from that
And
incident, like one of the
also,
guards?
I haven't contacted any of the guards that were there specifically, but I have contacted another guard or security personnel that told me he had heard about this at the time. So I've got many witnesses that have supported the incident, including the man that Robert Jameson, who went out with his crew to retarget the missiles in Oscar flight. And that's the one thing that my commander told me. Colonel Marlowe said that we were not at Echo flight. That was the information we were getting from the Air Force that they had declassified the Echo flight incident and sent us documents about that. They have not, to this day, declassified the Oscar incident. And that was the location we were at, Oscar flight. Two separate locations.
Oh.
One happened on March 16th, the Echo flight, 1967. Mine happened March 24th, 1967. 8 days later. 8 days.
Interesting.
And that was the incident that my commander had referred to after he called the command post during our incident. Remember, I told you, he said to me,
Yes.
the same thing happened at another flight. That was the Echo flight incident.
These are the only two ones that you know of?
No. And by the way, I was able to contact the Echo crew and talk to the man that was on duty at the time of their incident, Colonel Walter Fiegel, retired colonel. And I have him on tape, recorded telephone call also, where he talks about UFOs being reported over his missiles when all 10 of their missiles went down or were disabled. Again, for the same reason, guidance and control system failure. And that's not all. When I spoke with Mr. Ray Fowler, I think I talked about him before. He told me there was another incident in, let's see, it was late 1966, again at Malmstrom. Again, UFOs were seen over a launch control facility and all 10 of their missiles shut down. And in addition to that, a man by the name of Dave Shindelli, who was a captain of a crew at Minot Air Force Base in September of 1966. Minot is in North Dakota. And Shindelli has come forward, written a book, given interviews, and I think he was one of those that testified in 2010. At any rate, same thing. He relieved the crew who told him, the crew and the security guards upstairs, when he relieved them, that a UFO had been reported over their missiles and all 10 of their missiles were shut down. So within the span of a year, we lost or had disabled 40 missiles during UFO incidents.
During the Cold War.
During the Cold War.
In the Cold War. I'm pretty sure you're familiar. There's been almost the same incidents in Russia, correct? Similar?
There was one incident I know about in Russia, but there have been others. And that was in 1982, I think. And this was when Ukraine was a part of the Soviet Union. So this happened in Ukraine at a Russian intercontinental ballistic missile site.
Hmm.
a UFO comes over and actually starts the missiles on a countdown to launch. This is nothing the crew did,
Oh,
but a UFO was right above them when the missiles started going into a launch sequence. Scared the heck out of these guys, I'm
well,
sure.
I bet. 'Cause I know the
And they tried
protocols.
whatever they could to stop it, but they couldn't. But for some reason, while the UFO was there, it stopped the countdown, and missiles were never launched, of course. But again, my conclusion from this and other incidents which I've written about in my book, I think I've written about 13 incidents around nuclear weapons involving UFOs. I've concluded that really what they were trying to do was not frighten us or show they had power over us in this way, but to send us a message. And that message basically is humans, get rid of your nuclear weapons before you, for one reason or another, use them and destroy every living thing on Earth and on your planet. I think that was the basic message. I think it was a cautionary tale or a message of benevolence, warning us to take action to abolish nuclear weapons everywhere. I still
Well, that
think that's something that we can do. It sounds like an impossibility, but I don't think it is impossible. That's what my main effort is, to keep pushing that idea of abolishing all nuclear weapons.
well, it's not only a good one, but a noble one, noble cause. And that must have been a quite a wake-up call for these Soviet soldiers. I know the protocols over there in the missile silos are a lot different than it is in the States, but I can only imagine how these guys were reacting, and saying, what the hell's going on here?
Well, we have a situation right now where Ukraine-Russian war, it's essentially a standoff. And some people would say Ukraine is winning because they've got this drone capability. They can destroy, Russian aircraft in
Uh-huh.
Russia. And Russia, of course, is a nuclear power and has these so-called tactical nuclear weapons, as the United States does. The United States, of course, is in a war with Iran. Is a nuclear power with so-called tactical nuclear weapons. There's a reason I bring that up. And of course, Israel, also at war with Iran, also has nuclear weapons. Now, in the current appropriations bill for the Department of Defense, there's a substantial amount of money in that, what's called the 2027 National Defense Authorization Act, which is the act that provides the money for our national defense activities, amounting to close to $1 trillion, by the way, total in that act. $1 trillion with a T. But part of that
Many
is
zeros.
a lot of zeros. Part of that is for the appropriations of programs in developing tactical nuclear weapons and retrofitting certain aircraft like the F-35 to carry these tactical nuclear weapons, which can be used in warfare as opposed to the Cold War, strategic wars with our intercontinental ballistic missiles. these are supposed to be mobile, easily accessible nuclear weapons. In other words, that you could use in a minor war.
Correct. Correct.
Not the World War, but the smaller wars like what I was just discussing.
Yep. What's
The
currently going on?
The only problem is the payloads of these weapons, these tactical nuclear weapons, is equivalent in size to those used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the end of the war, about 15 kilotons equivalent TNT.
Which caused a lot of destruction.
A lot of people died, a lot of destruction.
Yep.
And that would only be the beginning of escalation to using the larger weapons.
True.
So we're still in a very precarious, risky situation on the use of these weapons, potential use of these weapons.
We've forgotten about, that both these countries have a vast amount.
I'm sorry, what?
We still have a vast amount of weapons, nuclear. So I don't think, it's still the kill.
And not only the U.S. and Russia, but of course, 9 countries are nuclear countries. Yes.
Correct.
9.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And why do they need them? I know they say they need them, but with so many already, as a matter of fact, I was reading an article. They have found, I don't know how many barrels of nuclear waste in the bottom of the ocean. Like 200 barrels or more, I think it was, of nuclear waste in the very bottom of the ocean that we know of.
That's right. That we know
we know of, Robert.
Yes.
So if it's not there's this nuclear threat, there's people out there just dumping this stuff. Right over the ocean and just poisoning.
It is if you like to eat fish.
Yeah, true.
It's
radiated.
A very correct threat.
Radiated. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Well, Robert, thank you very much for your time. For your time on the Paradigm Matrix. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Willie. My pleasure to be here with you. This is an important subject. I think I'm trying to get the public to take it more seriously because I know it's hard for most people to wrap their heads around the possible risk of nuclear war, but it is a real thing. It's there.
It is a possibility.
It is a possibility. It's been considered many times before. It was considered during the Korean War, during the war in Vietnam, of course, during the Cuban Missile Crisis. We came the closest to having a nuclear war.
And we don't know if it's even being considered right now by Putin.
That's a very real possibility. Not only Putin, but our own country and Israel, like I said.
That is true. That is true, Robert. Well, Robert, I look forward to having you on again. And I know that we can just go on and on and on about this subject.
Sure. Well, when I have more to share, I'll certainly be glad to come on again.
Yes. We're looking forward to it.
Okay, Willie.
All right, Robert. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Take care.
Welcome to the Paradigm Matrix with your host, Willie Miranda. This has been the Paradigm Matrix hosted by Willie Miranda.